Yeah, I'm watching the rise, and I wouldn't say I'm shocked, cause I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife, could've left 1,000 times just about my side. This one's for the grind, I knew it
went. My name is Randy Kaye, and I'm the host of the Caught Up podcast. Today we have Paul Boyd. He is a 20-year umpire who runs a company called Heather and Blue Officials. His company provides a service that assigns umpires to tournament and event directors. Paul, it's always great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you, Randy. Funny seeing you outside of a softball field.
No kidding, right? And that's kind of what, for me, like, I don't know you personally, you know, as, you know, it goes for a lot of our softball community. I know you from the field. I know when you're at our games or you're officiating a game or umpiring a game for us, you know, I know we're going to have a good umpire, but like, I don't know much about you. So, you know, obviously there's always this, you know, love and hate relationship with umpires. You know, you guys are necessary to the game so that we can play. But I thought it'd be great to kind of get to know you a little bit, have a conversation, and see who Paul Boyd is.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, about 15 minutes from Dodger Stadium in the Echo Park area, Echo Park, Silver Lake area. Go Dodgers. You know, I'll be rooting for it tonight. Grew up, you know, single mom with all the trials and tribulations of what inner city Los Angeles was in the late 80s and 90s. Lived there until 2004, where I had become involved with youth. You know, I've always said that I've loved working with kids. I didn't really like working with adults too much. Kids were my passion. Started off working in the local elementary schools and middle schools as a bilingual teacher assistant. Kind of parlayed that position into being a literacy assistant at one of the local libraries there. In 2004, I got an opportunity to move out to Colorado. Went to Colorado. I was there for probably a little bit short of 10 years. Started working in the area of youth corrections and treatment and rehabilitation, working with academy model programs with namely young men that were in the system for one reason or another. Inclusively, that's what brought me out to Arizona. I was with that company for about 15 years, and there was an opportunity here in Arizona. I worked in Arizona for about 8 years with that company, you know, still helping kids in a bunch of different roles and running programs. Some of you guys may be familiar with the old Arizona Boys Ranch. It's now Canyon State Academy. I worked there. I ran one of the programs there for a while. Really got to the point where I had moved so far up in the chain of command where I didn't have that interaction that I loved with kids anymore. So I decided to step away, worked with one of the local tribes for a little bit. And thankfully, once COVID hit, I was one of the few people that actually was able to come out of COVID positively. You know, during COVID, it was a time when we were one of the only places that were open for softball. You know, so I was able to connect with the people that I work with, and the rest is history, really.
That's interesting. So I didn't know you were from California. Obviously, like I said, we don't know each other that well, but it's funny because, you know, I always tell the girls, like, you know, one of the reasons I love coaching and one of the reasons I feel like I'm kind of meant to be in this space is because I've been there and done it. Like, and you're saying you're from California, you know, I think you mentioned the trials and tribulations of the inner city of that time. And so you haven't always been an umpire, or you weren't always, you know, working with kids. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some things, right? I'm sure you've been through it.
Absolutely. I mean, I've lost many friends to the streets. I was close a lot of times, you know, growing up in the early 90s, being in middle school and being in high school in the early 90s in Los Angeles. And when I say I'm from, a lot of people say they're from Los Angeles, but they're not really from Los Angeles. They're from the outskirts. They're from the suburbs. I'm a graduate of the Los Angeles. Well, I didn't actually graduate, but from the Los Angeles Unified School District. I was bused to schools. I rode the city bus to schools. So, I mean, I got caught up in what kids my age got caught up. You know, I grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. We were really the only Black family there. And when I say family, it was really just me and my mom. So I created a lot of relationships there. I had the opportunity to actually live in Mexico for 3 years with one of my neighbors there that I grew up with their kids when they were newly immigrated to the country. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, I went through a lot. I've seen a lot. I still deal with a lot of the trauma that I experienced as a youth. And my goal has been, ever since I kind of got my crap together, was to be that voice, be that person that I wish I would have had when I was going through what I was going through.
And what would you say was the biggest factor? Because I'm I grew up here in Arizona in Glendale,
Mm-hmm.
and been through a lot, seen a lot, and I, someday maybe I'll tell all those stories. But what would you say was the biggest factor of you making it through and getting through? Was it your mom? Was it what, because you said it was just you and your mom, so you didn't have a father figure
Right.
that maybe you were, quote unquote, afraid of or had to answer to. So what would you say was the biggest factor for you making it out of the neighborhood and being, successful as you are today?
Probably the biggest factor is I just got tired, to be honest with you. I've always been, not to toot my own horn, but I've always been a really smart kid. I was a really, really smart kid that kind of never lived up to his potential. I was in the gifted and talented program, which none of my friends were. I didn't want to be with the nerds. I just got to a point where it was a lot. It takes a lot out of you. People think being bad is easy, but it's not, because you got to deal with the consequences and repercussions of your actions. And
Right.
I was fortunate enough and I got my stuff together really late in life. I mean, I was probably 20 before I started to figure it out. And I've stumbled since then. It hasn't been a perfect ride in the last, 27 years, but I was fortunate enough at the age of 20 to be reunited with my current wife, that we've been together ever since 98. And I was fortunate enough, she had a child already. She was 3, Chloe, my daughter, my oldest. And I just saw that it was possible, that I could create that family that I always yearned for. And that's no knock to my mom. She did the best she could. She provided me with a lot. I mean, from trips to Disney World to going to the Baseball Hall of Fame. She always tried to give me she didn't have much, but she figured it out. I don't know how she figured it out, because we did a lot of things that some of my friends who had 2 parents that worked weren't able to have. And she was able to do that for me. But I think finally, I mean, I got tired. Like a lot of the stuff that people were doing at 21 and 23 and 24, I was doing when I was 13 and 14.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to have some strong male figures around me, some kind of adopted fathers, because that's what I think. So a lot of us that grew up without fathers, we kind of collect father figures.
Okay.
We latch on to certain people and we like this quality about them. And this guy works on cars, so I'm going to go look over his shoulder here. And this guy is really into sports, so I'm going to attach to him. Or this guy, I really think he's a good looking guy and he's athletic, and I want to be like that guy. So I was fortunate enough to collect a couple of father figures that, even though at the time I didn't necessarily appreciate or embrace, but I saw and learned things that I was able to apply to my life later.
Yeah. So when you talk about you got tired and you had enough, right? Was there like any one turning point where maybe you got in trouble, or because for me, I'll tell you right now, I was lucky. My brother got in a lot of trouble, and he used to always tell me, "Man, you're the luckiest dude I know." I had a couple of really good friends that were just, they were always kind of like the voice of reason, that were like, "Hey man, let's get out of here," or "Let's go home now. It's time to get out of here." And I'd always be the one like, "Oh no, hey, let's go here. It's 2:00 in the morning and there's got to be something else going on." Right. And I always had a couple of friends that were just, a little bit, just, I think it was, maybe their voice of reason was just good for me. And then secondly, where I think we also connect is, as you said, you reunited with your wife, your wife now. And I put a lot on my own wife, who, has watched me mature. over the years. And I tell everybody all the time, like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't her for her, because she kind of kept everything together. She kept, we had kids young, and and we just, man, we powered through. And to your statement, I wouldn't trade it for anything, man. I've been through it. I know what it's like to worry about things that maybe could come back to haunt you, or worry about things that, you got away with, but like looking at like the future, everything is freaking awesome. And so, good for you, man. Good for making those own, the decision on your own to kind of, move in a different direction. And so I know you as Paul, the umpire, and, the guy who, if we see you behind the plate, we're like, all right, cool. We got somebody back there who's consistent. We may not always agree with you, or, agree with every call, that, but I think you can be, you're perceived out there as an elite umpire. What got you into umpiring?
So originally the way I got into it was, I think Chloe was either 6 or 7, and I walked into Silver Lake Park Recreation Center, which happened to be the same park I used to play sports at, which my mom is a huge sports fan. I mean, from NASCAR to baseball to basketball, she's been fortunate enough to know a lot of professional athletes in her time and have relationships with them of all different types of relationships. So she was always big on sports, but it was the time. So when I got with Rebecca, my wife, I was like, no, Chloe needs to play sports. So I walked into Silver Lake Park Recreation Center, just trying to see what was going on, what sport I could put Chloe. It didn't really matter at that point. And it was signups for, probably it was T-ball. And the lady's like, okay, yeah, it's this much. Hey, do you want to umpire? You could tell she was a little stressed out. Somebody had pulled out on her. She didn't have anybody. I said, well, I've never done it and I don't have any gear. And she said, don't worry, we'll give you the gear. And I said, okay. And so that's where I kind of started in around the year 2000, just showing up at local rec ball, whether it was softball or baseball, not knowing any mechanics, not knowing any real rules, never having picked up a rule book, and just kind of went with it and tried to copy the guys on TV the best I could. And looking back on it, it was probably exciting for me because I've always been kind of a performer. When I look back at my schooling, the only classes I ever passed in junior high or high school were orchestra and drama. A's. Really? Everything else was failed. Obviously, over time, I've learned not to be the center of attention, and that's not what umpiring is about. But that's probably what I love. And the big over-the-top strikeouts and being loud and foul ball and doing all that stuff was probably what kept me engaged. And to a certain point, I think in the rec ball world, there is a place for that. Yeah. It's not too serious coming in, keeping it lighthearted. It's instructional. It's developmental. The ball's not always great. It's probably not good most of the time, but creating an environment where the girls feel safe, where the girls don't feel like they're because I don't think I'm intimidating, but obviously my stature, I have arms full of tattoos. I understand that I can be intimidating, but really trying to be the opposite of that, what was a great time, So I did that off and on for probably 10, 15 years. When I moved to Denver, I went to Parks and Rec for Aurora, Colorado. I went over to the local Little League, Arapahoe Little League. I worked there, still never picking up a book, never reading a rule, following what the older guys that were there, because I assumed, well, they're the older guys. They've been doing this for 30 years. They know what they're doing, and just going through the motions that way. I moved to Colorado. I moved to Arizona, and of course, I'm an umpire. Yeah, I can umpire. And the job that I took, I met a guy named John Flanagan, who's a high-level Division I baseball umpire. He's like, oh, yeah, you umpire? All right, we'll see. Come out to Copper Sky in Maricopa. There's a baseball tournament. Kirby Puckett's organization is having a baseball tournament. And I went out there. He's like, hey, you kind of know what you're doing. You're pretty good. You have a good zone. So I started doing a lot of baseball for Kevin Doherty and doing the perfect game stuff, doing that. And I saw a Facebook post one day at work, and it was a picture of an umpire that had zip ties holding his ball bags on. And this was the assigner, James Edmonds, who we all know, another kind of polarizing figure here in the umpiring world. And he was kind of poking fun at his umpire. And I made a comment, hey, I umpire and I have a belt. And so he calls me and he gives me the do you want to be a hometown hero, or do you want to see the best ball in the world? Do you want to be a part of, because at the time he was the PGF assigner.
Yeah.
But you remember back in the days when the PGF program was only qualifiers. There were no tournaments. It was just Ray Scotty had the qualifiers up at Pioneer Park every year, and that was it.
Yep.
And so he says, well, come on out. I'm going to put you with a veteran guy, and we're going to see what you got.
Who did he put you with?
He put me with a guy from the West Side by the name of Rick Huebner.
Okay.
Rick Huebner. And of course, at the time, Rick works in, coming full circle, Rick works for me now, you know, and my first game, and I'm thinking he's going to ease me into it. He kind of tells me, I'll ease you into it. I'll put you with the lower. He puts me with TJ Huzmanzada my first game.
Nice.
and when we talk about, you know, long time kind of polarizing figures in the game, like he's the one name that's going to always come up. He's very, very passionate. I'll use passionate because I don't want to use some other adjectives. But again, a great guy, really involved in the game, has had a lot of success with the Firecrackers organization over the years, but I wouldn't have put me in that game.
Right. Not to mention, I mean, he's a former NFL wide receiver and a pretty, when you talk about an intimidating person, like he's an intimidating figure, and he's his energy is high level, and he's going to argue the first pitch. Like he's go. Yeah. No, that's funny.
And still at that point, I hadn't picked up a book.
Really?
You know, I hadn't picked up a book yet. You know, I mean,
that's
I knew
so
I tried to study and I thought I knew what was going on. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what was going on, you know? So after that, getting hooked up with James, it just kind of grew from there. Got hooked up with Russ Olson over at USSSA. And you remember back in 17 and 18, they were the kings out here in the Valley, and 42 weekends a year. And I would make the trek way out to either Pioneer, Rose Mofford, Rio, to those parks. And I did that for probably about 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Just on the grind, going out there, driving, having the 8 o'clock game, and then having the 8 o'clock game the next morning. And I live in Florence. So that's an hour 15, hour 20, hour 25, depending on the time of day. But I just loved it so much that I just kept it up. And, you know, since then, a lot of opportunities have presented themselves. Like I mentioned earlier, with COVID coming and us being the only ones open, there was a guy that I was doing friendlies for, and I had never assigned. I mean, I put together little three-field tournaments for the Punishers and Foddy out there in Queen Creek, and had helped out Marcus Todd with the Storm at the time. And, you know, Ramsey, well, obviously we know Ramsey is out here. He had just moved here. He was looking on the internet and see who was doing stuff in Arizona, and he somehow found Marcus Todd. And he asked Marcus Todd, you know, if you needed a UIC or an umpire that you really trust, who would it be? And fortunate enough, Marcus said Paul. It would definitely be Paul. And I had a meeting with Ramsey, and I still wasn't really, I was like, I just want to umpire. I don't want these responsibilities. And I said, I'll do it. But if in 6 months I decide that I don't want to do this, you know, I don't want there to be any hard feelings. I still want to work for you. I still want to be involved with you. And he said, yeah. And I mean, that was over 4 years ago.
Well, when you met with him, what was it like? I mean, I'm sure, I mean, knowing Ram now, like, I mean, he came in and just kind of slid in and just hustled it. And like you said, is that what you meant by when you said we were the only place open? You, Ramsey, and Queen Creek,
right? I mean, it was us and St. George, Utah, were the only place tournaments were going on.
Right.
So all the California teams, people that really weren't into traveling, were out here, and we were at Desert Mountain Park and Red Mountain and figuring it out. I didn't know what I was doing. Ramsey really didn't know what he was doing, but you know what? That hustler mentality, part of that stuff that I learned growing up in inner city Los Angeles and kind of BSing my way through things. Yeah, it's all worked out for us, really, and through that, and why that's important is because through those times I got to meet a lot of umpires. Guys that I wouldn't have had access to, guys that wouldn't have come to Arizona. I mean, guys from California, from Texas, from Vermont, from Connecticut, from New Mexico, and kind of formed my circle. And I truly believe that I have the best group of travel ball umpires in the country. I've umpired pretty much every tournament in this country that matters. And I know, and that's no knock against anyone, but I know when those top level organizations, whether Arizona based or California based or wherever from across the country, they come here. I know Ramsey gets a lot of feedback, and that's not me. They're not saying Paul's a great umpire. He does great because, I'm rarely on the field during those tournaments.
Right.
But those guys who want to come out, who know that there's a great product here in Arizona, and I try to treat them well. Ramsey's been huge as far as providing that hospitality for umpires, going above and beyond, whether through hotels or through providing just things like water. Because for a long time, umpires didn't even get water at tournaments. Providing meals, providing swag, providing even a coin that can memorialize a tournament. That's huge for these guys. And through that, I've been able to grow into not just that rec ball guy or that high-level travel ball guy, but kind of leverage some of those relationships and turned it into a college career.
Yeah.
So
you're doing college stuff now?
Absolutely. I umpire at every level of softball except high school, from Division I to 12U rec ball.
Yeah.
So I have this will be my fourth season of college ball, obviously starting here with the ACCAC, the Community College District. Did that for a couple of years, and then was fortunate enough last year to get my first couple of Division I series, and this year just adding on to that, and again working all levels, all the way up into the pros. I've been fortunate enough the last couple of years to work the WPF league, and really seeing some of the greats, and even being over my skis a little bit, as far as the speed of that game, and saying, Paul, you better figure this out, because when the bat comes off of when the ball comes off of Jocelyn Alo's bat, you don't have a lot of time to make any decisions. You just got to go. Yeah. So it's really been a great ride, and I'm one of the few people that's been able to make a career out of softball. And I'm just really fortunate to have a great team. And again, it's not me. I kind of put my name on it, but these guys and gals that come out every weekend and grind it out at all levels of softball for me are really what makes me great, and what has made Heather and Blue Officials what it is right now.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I think when you look at 2020 and COVID, we were doing stuff up in Prescott because Prescott was open too. So we had some teams coming up there, and I know Queen Creek was open. And I kind of feel like it was a perfect storm for people like Ramsey and yourself, because, I'm just going to say it like this. I think we all got comfortable, and it was easy to sit back and just wait it out, especially, when really that's what we were told to do, right? But I know for myself and the people that I was surrounded with, we wanted games, man. We wanted to still get games. We had kids we were still trying to get committed. And then when you start having those conversations, people, like you said, from California and other states, if we're open, man, they were ready to roll out. So I think it was a perfect storm for you guys to step in and provide an opportunity. And then it sounds like it just grew. And would you say, like, there's a level of professionalism now, in my opinion, that travel ball coaches and travel ball organizations and even travel ball umpires, there's a professionalism now, and there's a standard. And first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, if you do agree, do you think, did you really see that start to take place?
That's really a hard thing for me to say, because I don't know if it's because I've moved up and been exposed, because looking at some of these guys that you see every weekend, I really don't have that much time really in the games. Like I said, 2017 was really my first time of working any type of competitive travel ball. But I think we are seeing more people that are like myself that have been able to make a career and provide for their families through softball, whether it's these mega organizations or these mega tournaments, or however or doing lessons, or even doing the social media thing. We've seen it kind of evolve into something that's more than just a hobby, and more than just something you do in your free time, or something to support your daughter. I think we're seeing more and more coaches that, such as yourself, that no longer have kids in the game, that are still continuing to grind it out and form the next level of players for the NCAA level and to go on and really create something for themselves. Because, you know, athletics are the doorstep for any institution. You know, when you think about, sure, do people talk about schools and the great education that you can get, but how many times do you have a conversation at a bar or at a restaurant and they say, wow, do you know that Northwestern really has a great pre-med program? I guess maybe doctors do, but in your normal everyday conversation, you don't say that. They say, man, did you see how X school got destroyed last week? Or did you see that stud that's going to go to the league next year? That's how we're introduced to a lot of these institutions. So, and for girls, it's not like baseball where there's a big payday at the end. The payday is that education. And it's not always a free ride. The free ride isn't it. It's opportunity for a young lady to stay engaged in athletics, knowing that by being engaged in athletics, she's got to keep her grades up and has to grind out the academic part of it to ultimately receive that diploma at the end of 4 or 6 or however many years she goes to school.
Right. Well, and and actually, you know, the money is starting to be there a little bit. It's funny. I was having a conversation with a Division I coach in California, and they lost one of their pitchers, and he said, dude, they offered her 160 grand to go. So now he said, my thought process is, you know, I'm going to go get this other kid, and my pitch to this kid is going to be, hey, come here for 2 years. We'll get you ready. And then when it's your time to go off and get a payday, we'll figure out how to help you do that. And so I think the money's starting to come a little bit, but I 100% agree with you. It's still about the education. It's about the competition and, you know, just setting yourself up for, you know, a better future after the fact. So, what do you like best about being an umpire? You said you don't umpire that much anymore, but when you do, what do you like best?
Biggest thing is the camaraderie with other umpires. You know, I when I say I don't umpire that much, it's mainly here in Arizona, because most of the time I'm either UICing or I'm out at Arizona grounds and I'm in charge of the fields and I have more of a supervisory role. You know, that's why I love my summers, you know, because I get to go to Colorado, I get to go to Oklahoma City, I get to go down to Huntington Beach, to PGF Nationals. So one being, you know, just being around other umpires, guys that maybe I'm not good enough to work with during the college season, those Power 5 umpires that are working the high-level D1s as opposed to the mid-major small schools that I work. And also really just seeing the development of the girls, especially, you know, girls that I umpired when they were playing Little League over at Queen Creek Heat or back in the U-Trip days. And now we see I can't open up my Facebook without seeing, hey, this girl's committed here, this girl's committed here. And really that pride of saying, like, I mean, that wasn't me, I didn't do the work, but to be able to say, hey, you know what, I used to umpire her, or I had her when she was at Red Mountain. I was at a Division I series last year, and you know, one of the pitchers was a Red Mountain kid. Yeah, I was at a Division II series down at Western New Mexico, and the second baseman was a Red Mountain kid. And I'm like, and that's not a plug to Red Mountain, big up Red Mountain. They've done a good job for a lot of years, but it just happened to work out like that, you know. And seeing them from, you know, maybe kids that didn't have the best attitudes or were crybabies about the strike zone, now, you know, growing into high-level Power 5 players, to me, that's friggin' amazing, you know?
What's your least favorite thing about umpiring? Time away from home, you know, when you are umpiring in the summer, you know, coaches, certain like if you had to say what was your least favorite, what is it?
Least favorite is probably a couple of things, is the politics. Just like anything in the umpiring world, there are tons of politics. You know, you would think, well, it's just umpiring. What's the big deal? But no, sometimes a lot of the times it's about not what you know, but who you know.
Sure.
You know, so that's difficult when you sit back, especially a guy like me that's hungry and wants to move up and has been fortunate enough to move up a lot faster than other people. It's like, well, and you try not to do this because you don't want to be a hater, but you're looking, you're like, oh man, that guy's on that game. How come I can't be on that game? Why didn't I get that game? And like I said, a lot of times it's who you know, and not
but that
what
keeps you hungry, I imagine, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and I got to snap out of it and say, shut up, Paul. Well, look at yourself first. What are you not doing? What
Right.
boxes don't you check? Hey, well, you know what? That guy has 20-inch biceps and you got a belly. So I better get in the gym. And that's the reality with the growing of softball. Now, you can subscribe to ESPN Plus and you can pretty much see every Division I game in this country.
Yeah.
And that
didn't fall games on there.
Right. And that didn't used to be the case. So fat guys like me, they could hide at the mid-majors because nobody would see them anyway. But now you turn on TV, and so now I know I have to push myself to make sure I'm in the gym, make sure I'm eating right, make sure that I can keep up with these girls. Because these girls are 17, 18, 19. They're at their prime of their athleticism, and I'm not.
Yeah.
And I would also say that I probably struggle myself with uninformed coaches or coaches that have, like, I understand why those coaches are needed, because if they're not there, then the girls might not play.
Right.
But I'm there for a reason. I should have good command of the rules and good command of the mechanics. Like, I'm not going to allow you to question every single call that I make. So sometimes those coaches that are a little bit too passionate or are trying to relive their own success or lack of success through these girls can really ruin. And for me, it's not like, oh my God, you're ruining my day. No, I just look at the girls and how it affects them. And I'm like, you don't know what you're doing to this kid. Going back to when I worked in youth corrections, there was a time when I worked at a facility in Colorado that was the highest level facility for any of the female offenders in the state of Colorado. And I'm coming from the boys facility thinking, I'm just going to run the same program with the boys that I run with the girls. They wear the same shirts. They wear the same clothes. The program's called the same. They work out every day. I'm going to do the same thing that I do with the boys, and I'm going to be successful. No, there's certain responsibility factors with girls, as you know, having a long career working with girls, that you can't do with the girls that you do with the boys. And some of the things we do with the boys we shouldn't be doing either, but it's the way that they process, and they're a lot of times a little bit more emotionally intelligent than the boys. So it could be one simple thing that you say that could derail this girl from greatness. So we and that's not saying you got to baby girls and sometimes you don't have to really get in their stuff and let them know how things are, but you definitely have to approach it. I always approach any interactions with children as if they've had a certain level of trauma in their life. And I'm going to be sensitive to that trauma. I don't know what they've been through, and they maybe have gone through no trauma. But if I approach it that way and being cognizant of, hey, something I may say may remind them of their abusive father or may remind them of a bad relationship they had, then I can make sure that I'm not the one that damages or further traumatizes or re-traumatizes that young athlete. So I would just say some of these, I wish that I had the time to put together a training program for coaches and a training program, of more developed training program for umpires, but I'm just so busy. I'm really looking towards that because I think there's a few little things that we could teach coaches that would make their interactions with umpires a little bit more positive.
What would one of those things be?
The way you approach umpires.
Like
you can approach
demeanor?
an umpire. I would say your affect, your demeanor, coming out, not barreling out of the dugout screaming, coming out asking questions. Hey, what did you see there? Instead of, she was safe by a mile. How did you miss that? Hey, Blue, tell me what you saw there. Okay, because from over here it looked like maybe you were blocked out a little bit. Is there any chance you were blocked out? Because remember, you want something from that umpire. You're trying to get something. And what do they say? You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, or whatever the saying is.
Right,
if you come up, and not saying that you have to kiss their butt, but at the end of the day, you're trying to get something out of them. So in our everyday interactions with people, how do we respond to people that bark commands at us as opposed to people that are asking in a calm, bland, and professional manner?
Oh, we get defensive, right?
Presenting questions. Hey, what did you have there? Hey, this is what I had. Do you have something different? Hey, would you mind getting help on that one? And if they say no, they say no. and accepting that. A lot of times these coaches dig their own graves because they won't let it go. You're never going to win. That's what coaches don't understand. You're not going to win that battle.
Right.
So try to finesse it as much as you can to get what you want, at least to have the guy check, at least for the guy to be humble enough to say, hey, you know what, maybe I was behind on that play. I mean, there's plays out there that I make calls and I'm hoping coaches will come out on.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not robots, we're human. I'm like, oh, I kicked that one. I can't safe that out right now, or I can't out that safe. But you know what? If he comes and asks for help right now, I'm going to go to my partner and I'm going to say, dude, I kicked that one. We don't really have nothing to talk about, but I'm going to overturn it. And if something goes awry, that's how we're going to handle it. So, but it starts from the plate meeting. It starts prior to the plate meeting. Are you there? Are you ready with your lineups? Are you taking the attitude of he's got to wait for me? I just got off the field. You know, just shaking, using first name, making eye contact with umpires, not walking up there like you're the best thing to ever happen to softball. And I know there's umpires that do that too.
Yeah.
That present and think that they're bigger than the game. And that's the biggest thing, because I can teach the X's and O's and where to stand and what the rules are, but more difficult is to teach is approachability. And I think those umpires that are approachable, that are even of less skill, make it further than those umpires that have the rule book dialed and the mechanics dialed, but are unapproachable, because nobody wants to be around those guys.
When you say mechanics, what do you mean? You've said that a few times.
So mechanics is basically your movements on the field, where you're supposed to be when a ball's hit to left field and you're in this position. Where are you supposed to be? What are the angles that you're supposed to take on a play? What is your strike supposed to look like? What are you supposed to verbalize during certain? So we actually, we have not only an NCAA rule book, but also a mechanics book. So here, I actually have them right here. So for a college umpire, we have to be proficient in the rules of softball, but also in the mechanics. We're expected to know this front to back. This tells you what the rules are when something happens. This tells you where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do.
Got it. Okay. And so when you talk about the overall message I'm getting is just treat everybody with respect the game. You know, we all have to be there, right? I mean, we can't play games without umpires.
Right.
You know, you're not playing games, or you're not umpiring games without teams. Mm-hmm. And so it's a relationship that I think, for the most part, I see is been pretty good. Sometimes personally, I wish that I could probably get on you guys more. It's just not my demeanor. I'm not. Right. It's not my style. But I feel like maybe sometimes I should. But let's talk about.
Nah, you're good. I don't think you should.
Let's talk about fan engagement. Do the fans and parents affect umpires in general?
Absolutely. Should they?
Okay.
In my opinion, no. Could I say that they don't affect me? I wish I could.
Right.
But that's on me. That's on me to deal with that. And obviously it's one thing to get some chirping from the fans, and it's another thing when fans get personal and they're over the top with things. I tell all my umpires on my email when I send out the schedule, do not engage with fans. Yeah. Fans are the responsibility of the head coach. And most tournament directors have embraced that concept. Hey, if I got a problem with this guy, hey, Randy, guy in the blue shirt, you need to deal with him.
Right.
And if you don't, then maybe you're going to be the one that gets restricted, or maybe you're going to be the one that gets ejected. And that's not a concept that's embraced by not all umpires, not all tournament directors, but here in the Valley, we have for the most part embraced that. And because most of the time, those fans that are over the top, you already know who they are.
Yep.
You've been dealing with them on another level. They're the ones that are calling you, asking you about why their kids aren't playing. Right. They're the ones that are calling you and questioning you about what you're doing and why did you bat for her in the 6th inning. So most of the time, coaches are good about that and dealing with their fans. And a lot of times, and it's not always men. There are a couple of boisterous women out there in the game, but a lot of times the wives will deal with those husbands too out there.
Right.
And it'll just take a look.
When that email goes out and you see such and such team or coach, is there any kind of like, hey, look, this and this, like, you're aware of it. Like you said, who those fans are and who those coaches are. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's pointed out? Like, hey, let's make sure stays under control, or we've had this history?
So that's kind of a double-edged sword, because you don't want to, if Coach Johnny is that guy that gets dumped every weekend and is over the top and questions everything, I don't want that umpire that doesn't know him to walk in there with a bias to start looking for stuff. But at the same time, so at the college level, it's important we do that. We go to the team's website, we look at the coaches, we see what they did, where they were before, where they used to play, to kind of get an idea and a gauge of who this coach is, and what we might. Same thing, and we look at stats, and we look at tendencies, and we look at stolen bases, and who are the girls that are stealing the most bases, so we're not caught behind a play or something. So I think I don't do it a lot. Obviously, there are some big characters in the game of softball where I'd be doing a disservice to my umpire of not giving him a heads up and saying, hey, this is what this guy does. Just be prepared for it. I'm not telling you how to manage your game, but just know this is how he always acts, and this isn't a one-off for him. Because sometimes we can sit back and be like, if Randy Kaye is in on every pitch and is kind of chirping a lot, that's not really Randy Kaye's demeanor. So maybe something's going on with Randy Kaye this week at home or at his job. So I might give you a little benefit of the doubt. But there's other coaches who are like that constantly. And I have to say, hey, if he starts with this, you need to shut him down quick, utilize your tools, especially when we're playing travel ball most of the time under high school rules, warn, restrict, eject. Or go straight to ejection if it's merited, but utilize your tool, give him the opportunity to eject himself from the game.
Right.
I'm not going to eject you. Your behaviors are going to eject you for the game. And we never want that either, because now the girls have to play the next game without a coach.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't tolerate certain behaviors that are they don't belong in the game.
Right.
They don't belong in the game. At the end of the day, you have been entrusted by parents to help mold and guide these kids, to help them reach whatever their goals may be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that I manage that environment to the best of my ability. Because we've all been on the field and you're like, I can't believe how that coach keeps getting kids to sign up. He's abusive.
Right.
If he talked to my kid like that, I'd punch him in the face.
Yeah.
But parents have made that choice. We all know who those guys are. A lot of times they're some of the most successful guys in the game that you're like, dude, there's no way in hell I don't care how many national championships he's gotten and how many D1 commits he's had or what relationships he had. I will not allow my daughter to be talked to like that. So just trying to really balance that and not give too much information where that umpire is going in and being biased or looking for something, but also so they're aware.
Yeah.
So they're not walking into the lion's den. Because sometimes we may have an umpire, a lesser accomplished umpire, on one of those really big games. Because I don't get into that. I don't say, hey, when Randy or Corey's team or Ramsey team's out there, I'm going to put the best guy on there. If I've said this group of guys is doing the 18U, hey, whatever falls. I don't look at the matchups.
Yeah.
I might look at it afterwards, after I've done the assignments, like, ooh, this is a good game. Let me see what umpires are on here. I more separate them. Okay, this guy's good for 18s. This guy's good for 16s. These guys are good for 14s. Who they get, they get. And in some places across the country, because, we have a lot of tournament directors that have teams. Yeah. They say, I want the World Series umpire on my game, or I want this guy, or I don't want this. I'm fortunate enough that Ramsey never does that. He doesn't care who he gets. He knows that he's got to win that game. And he doesn't really give me a whole ton of feedback about who gets what games. Obviously, if I know they're big game, if it's Arizona Last Blast, that 18s group is going to be a collective group of regional, super regional, and World Series umpires. Something that I'm super proud of, that those guys would even consider coming to work for me. But yeah, that's just kind of where I look at it. It is what it is.
Nice. Let's talk about your company, Heather and Blue. What just real quick or brief, like how did you decide to do this, or what got you to start this company? You obviously, I know you talked a little bit about the COVID and being able to form relationships, but talk about what your company does, what it means to assign umpires. How difficult is that? What are the what does it take to do that?
So really, I was doing it before the company, and then there's this thing called the IRS, and I needed to kind of legitimize things because it had grown so fast. I mean, in our infancy, I was walking around with 40 grand cash in my car and just handing money to umpires, and that's just not ideal. So as my company began to grow and we all kind of got a little bit more above board and realized that, hey, this is actually going to work. We need to legitimize this. At the time, it was really just One Swing events and Heather and Blue, but I started to get more opportunities. So not only do I sign for Ramsey and his stuff, I have the No Limit contract, which is our regional level PGF stuff. I have 2 of the biggest Triple Crown events, which zoom into June and the Dawn Battle's on, that again, got that relationship with Krista and now with Caitlin Flynn because of Ramsey. They needed umpires. Said, well, have my guy. He wasn't awesome. This is my guy. If you take him, that's going to take the umpires away from my event. He's like, dude, I want this guy to eat. And I've had that opportunity. I've also established a relationship with PGF Super Select Events, which is the premier organization for the younger ages in the country. I mean, I think we sometimes fall short here in Arizona, California, and the West at those younger age groups, but down in the South and in the Midwest, they're playing competitive at 8U, and you go out there and see 10U ball, and they're using college pitching, and they're locating the ball, and they do a really good job. So Jeff Mack with PGF Super Select, again, through Ramsey, gave me that opportunity to assign all of his championships in Tennessee last year. And I'm fortunate enough, I've been awarded a couple of more of those tournaments. So I think I'm up to 7 or 8 tournaments with him. And then bringing it back home, Queen Creek Heat Little League. A lot of East Valley players have come out of that Queen Creek Heat Little League, and a lot of coaches too. I look at a lot of the landscape of those East Valley teams, and I'm like, dude, I remember that dude when he was coaching the Yellow Daisies at the Little League. So the company is kind of was a necessary evil, just because I needed to have my stuff in order and make sure that I was protected insurance-wise with IRS, and I was able to really be a legitimate company to be able to access things like bank accounts and that stuff. But it's turned into something that's just been super great for me and my family. We talked a little bit, you mentioned about, being away from home. And yes, I am away from home a lot, but I am fortunate enough that the time that my wife and I do have together, we're able to go on super cool vacations and do a lot of things that I never dreamed that I would be able to do, So Heather and Blue's been good to me. Softball's been really good to me. Arizona was a great move. Everybody, why'd you move to Arizona? Why I moved here is one thing, it was for work, but why I stayed is another. I've had opportunities to go back to California or go back to Colorado, and I just like what I'm doing so much that I would hate to try and start from scratch out there and, I'll be an assigner. They got their people already. Yeah. So softball is definitely what's kept me and my family in Arizona. And I think that's a really cool thing to say. Girls fast pitch softball. I've never been a coach, and my daughter played a little bit in high school. And once she got out of the game, I think that's where I really softball. Such a huge part of my life. It was almost like my heart broke, and it wasn't her, it was her decision. Did it upset me a little bit? Yeah. Because now what am I going to do at Saturday at 7 a.m. when we're usually on our way to McDonald's to get our McMuffins and drive all the way to Rio Vista? So I just changed out her softball bag for my umpire bag. And like I said, the rest is history.
I'll be honest, I miss those days at Rio Vista. I remember I had East Valley kids used to be like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to play all the way out there. And now I'm on the other end of it, going out to, I always want to say Legacy, Arizona Athletic.
The grounds.
Arizona the grounds. The grounds. So that's all great stuff, man. I love hearing that. It's interesting. Let me ask you before we go, for anybody that wants to become an umpire, because you said it, you can make a good, it's a good side hustle, right? It's a good way to make a little bit of money, especially if you love the game. Mm-hmm. Former players. I have a kid on one of our 16U teams that umpires obviously it must be younger kids, but you can make a little bit of money as an adult or a kid, right? So how does one become an umpire? Is there like a class, or what would you suggest somebody do that has an interest in becoming an umpire?
So, I mean, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of umpire classes out. Back in the day when USA Softball was a little bit bigger in this area, they're really the only organization that has a formalized training for umpires. It's a whole lot of just, recommendations and people vouching for you. I would say you should start with your local leagues. Go to your little league, go to your rec ball, talk to the umpires that are there, talk to the coordinators, and ask them and tell them, hey, I want to do this. If you're a player still, talk to the umpires that are out there on the field, because a lot of those guys want to mentor young folks. Yeah. We have a lot of opportunity here with Queen Creek Heat Little League. Fortunately, it's super east, so that kind of takes it out of the game for a lot of the West Valley folks. But Leonard Flores out there, who's the president of that league, he's given us money to train. He's given us the ability to pay umpires as they're at their first day out there. Obviously they're not going to make the full wage, but they're going to get something to put some gas in their car and to help them kind of ease some of the expense of that entry level gear that they're going to need to do. I would say call me, call James Edmonds, call some of those guys that you see at the park every weekend, because we have all levels of ball. That's the beauty of things. Like I said, I got the Little League. Some of my friends, we have Apache Junction Little League, we have Queen Creek Little League, Chandler's Girls Softball, the No Limit tournaments, the Ramsey's tournaments. So pretty much we have a spectrum of levels of ball where we can, because I don't ever want to set anyone up for failure. I don't want someone in their first real game to go out there and umpire TJ's game. Or even your game or Corey's game or any of these high level games that we have here in the Valley, because they're going to be over their heads and it may be a negative experience, because you know what you paid for your tournament and you're expecting a certain level of quality. And if you're not going to get it, you're probably going to be vocal about it, and you have every right to be vocal about it. So like I said, just to recap, start with your local leagues. Get started, go there, ask questions. I know the Tempe Lady Hawks, they do a training every year. I think the lady's name is Bobby Jones. She puts stuff out on Facebook on the local stuff about doing training out there. We do training, more of an informalized thing. I'll come out to the Little League and get you started, have you work some bases, show you about those mechanics that you're supposed to have. And when you're ready, we'll put you behind the plate and let you run with it. So just ask questions, talk to your umpires, look for umpires that you respect, that you think are pretty decent, that you see a lot, that you have a good rapport with, and reach out to them. And a lot of times they're going to say, call Paul, call James, call whoever, but we'll do our best to try and get you lined up, because there's definitely a need, especially as we continue to grow. I mean, we have at least 4 competing organizations here in Arizona, in the Valley, that always need umpires. Yeah. So there's opportunity. You can make upwards of $40 an hour doing this stuff, which is a pretty respectable wage even in this economy. I don't think my parents ever made $40 an hour.
Right. So and what does that entry level cost look like for the gear?
So I mean, if you were to just go out and buy the gear, you could probably get equipped for around $200 or $250.
Okay.
I always have extra gear. I either give people gear or say, here's a chest protector for $20. Here's a max for $20. You don't have the money, I'll just take it out of your pay, whatever. I would never want the gear to put up that barrier to someone beginning. We'll figure it out. Right. We'll figure. Guys that retire from the game, they always give me their gear because they know I have so much stuff going on with the Little League. So if you have the desire, we'll figure. If you got to go get a blue polo shirt, one of the uniform school shirts from Target to start, then that's what we'll do. So if you think it's something that you want to do, reach out, do it. What's the worst that can happen? Cool. I really wish we could get more of those former players into it, especially those catchers. I mean, but unfortunately what we hear too often is like, oh, we see the way that you're treated, we don't want to do that. So I think for coaches to think about that, think about that next level of umpire coming up. If you don't think you're getting out of the game, you're going to need umpires for the next 20 years. And I'm not going to be doing it for the next 20 years. And a lot of our umpires out there are most of the time I'm the young guy in the room.
I was going to
say,
I'm
47.
They're older, yeah.
So think about that. And so many young women that might want to do it are just so discouraged, and they're like, there's no way I would do that. I see the way that either my coach or the other coach talks to you guys. And those are the girls. It's a girl's game.
Yeah.
It's a girl's game. We need more female umpires, just like we need more female coaches. Yeah. But for some reason, it's just not happening.
Totally agree, man. Normally I ask for a final thought. I don't think there's a better final thought than that. Let's make sure that we're setting that example, because Absolutely. If there's a female that wants to umpire, like you just said, what better than having a catcher back there behind the catcher Absolutely. Calling balls and strikes and being able to even help that young player that's trying to make their pitcher look good. Paul, it's great, man. I really that was a great conversation. Absolutely. I'm glad we did this. I appreciate your time. All right. Hey, I just want to say thanks for listening. We will continue to elevate the sport and get caught up with those who are influential in the fast pitch community, and hopefully we can help you navigate your softball journey. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe our YouTube channel, Caught Up with Randy Kaye, or at Coach KAZ. You can listen on Spotify, Caught Up with Randy Kaye. You can also follow us on X and on Instagram using the same handles, at Coach KAZ. Thanks again.
Thank you, Randy.
Awesome, dude.